Hello everyone, I'm Karen Catlin, and today I'm so happy to be here at this IEEE WIE Women in Engineering Live Chat. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me to give this talk and lead this live chat. It's going to be about my book, Present, A Techie's Guide to Public Speaking. And I am going to ask Jordan if she's shared the slides so that all of you can follow along. The slides will be posted to a Google Drive. So, Jordan, did you post the slides? And let's let people know where they can find them. Give her just a second. I believe she will post them in the chat window if she hasn't already done that, the chat window for Ustream. I'll assume she does. I can't see that myself. Oh wait, here I go. There we go. Thank you so much. They're in the chat window for the Ustream window. So please just take a second, go to that link and take a look at the slides, and I'll be talking to the slides and telling you when to forward each one. Okay. And if you have any questions as we go along, please use that chat window in the Ustream window to ask your questions, and I will be addressing them. So let's get started. So I remember it so well. The exact day when I decided to embrace public speaking. And it's not like I had never done any public speaking before. Earlier in my career, actually going back to college, I was studying computer science, and I had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant for some of the intro to computer science classes at my university. So I helped with some lectures then, and I did some public speaking. Then as I started my career, I did a little bit more public speaking. I worked as a research assistant in what was back then state-of-the-art hypertext object-oriented research lab at Brown University. And when you work in a research lab, you do research, you publish papers on your work, and you give talks at conferences on your papers. So I did some public speaking then too. Then, as I moved through my career, moving into software engineering roles in tech companies, and over time, moving into executive leadership, where I was a vice president at Adobe Systems most recently, I certainly had to give some presentations at company meetings, team meetings, talk on panels, and so forth. So I've done some public speaking over my career. However, I don't think I was very good at it. I certainly did not enjoy it. And I did not welcome the opportunity. It was more something I just had to do. But that all changed on one day. That one day was when I was on a walk with a mentor, and I was getting her advice about how to start a consulting business. You see, I had recently left my job at Adobe Systems. This was about 4 years ago. I had left my job because I wanted to help other women in the tech industry. I had become very passionate about helping women within Adobe have the careers that they wanted to have. And I had been doing a lot of mentoring. I had sponsored Adobe's Women in Tech group. I had started that initiative. And I decided I wanted to leave Adobe so that I could help more women in tech and have a broader influence. So I was getting this mentor's advice about how I could go about starting a leadership coaching practice focused on women. And as we were walking and she was giving me different ideas and asking questions, she asked a very important question. She said, "Karen, do you do much public speaking?" And oh my gosh, when she asked that question, all of the stage fright I had ever felt over my whole career kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I got nervous in my stomach. I think my heart started to race. And in my mind, I kept saying to myself, I remember this, like, no, Karen, I don't do public speaking. No, I don't enjoy public speaking. No, I don't want to do more public speaking. But I kind of zipped my lips, kept all of that to myself, because I realized that why she was asking that question was because public speaking could be critical for me to unlock this consulting practice, to spread my story about being a woman in tech, to talk about what I found was important, and look for ways to share my message and generate some business. So instead of saying all those things, no, I don't enjoy public speaking, no, I don't want to do more public speaking, blah, 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 I simply answered her question with the simple statement of, I need to do more of it. And at that point, I made a pledge to myself to start speaking in public once a month. I knew I just had to have some almost shock therapy to get myself over this hump of not wanting to speak in public. So I started speaking in public once a month, set that goal, and I'm proud of myself. I'll share with you that most months I've met that goal. And in my busiest month, I gave 6 talks or spoke on 6 panels. It was a combination of the two. And I have turned a corner. I totally love public speaking now. And I'm so pleased to be here today to share with, kind of my journey with all of you and to share some of my favorite tips. Now, for those of you who are looking at the slides, please go to slide number 2. This is a picture of myself and my co-author, Purnima Vijay Shankar. And Purnima is the founder of Femgineer, and she was previously the founding engineer at Mint.com. And Purnima and I met. It's sort of an interesting sort of success story about networking. We were both invited to a women's lunch that Andreessen Horowitz was hosting for women in the tech industry who were working in their portfolio companies. And Purnima and I were just randomly seated next to each other. We started chatting, realized we had a lot in common, and started collaborating at that point. We started doing some talks together. We started running some workshops. And over time, we started teaching public speaking. And as we taught public speaking, starting out workshops and things like that, after doing it a few times, we realized, we really should write a book so that even more people can hear about our best practices, our approaches to public speaking, and so forth. So I'm clicking to slide 3. The book that we wrote together last year is called Present, a Techie's Guide to Public Speaking. And you can read more about it at femgineer.com/present-book if you want to see more about it. It's also available on Amazon. But I'm so excited that to announce that for all of you on the webinar, we are making a free version of our ebook available to you. And in the chat window, Joradna will post the link to that free download. It's available to the first 100 people, so maybe right after the webinar you can go and download it if you're interested in that before all the copies are taken. Okay, let's move on to slide number 4. Today in this live chat, I'm going to talk for probably about half an hour, and I am going to cover a handful of things as seen on this agenda slide. The first is I'm going to talk about why you should even do public speaking, what doors will open, and so forth. I'm then going to cover stage fright and give you some strategies for handling stage fright. We'll then move on to, well, why would even anyone want to hear what I have to say? I am not an expert, so how do we get over that hump and extract our expertise so we do identify topics that we can talk about? Next, I'll talk a little bit about how to engage an audience and identify your ideal audience. We'll talk a little bit about storytelling and how to start your talks with stories. And then I'll also share some strategies for handling Q&A when you give a talk. Okay, let's get started. Moving on to slide number 5. Now, I shared at the very beginning why I decided to start doing more public speaking. I needed to open doors to unlock my consulting business. But this is also true for anyone working in any kind of job. Doors will open when you speak in public. You basically become more visible. You start to share your expertise, your knowledge, You stand out from other people. And as a result, more senior people in your field or your organization take notice. They notice what you're up to, notice what you're doing, and they might think of you for additional opportunities that might line up perfectly with your career. I'm moving to slide 6. Now, the other thing, though, that we've noticed is networking is so much easier when you are giving a talk. I don't know about all of you, but I'm an introvert, and so is my co-author, Purnima. And when we go to conferences or meetups or any kind of event, we're not always sure who we should be trying to network with. Who are the right people that might be interesting for us to talk to, that might lead to further opportunities for work or further speaking opportunities, whatever it might be. But the thing is, when you give a talk, people approach you. They approach you after the talk to ask additional questions, share their insight, and the conversations just are a little bit more elevated than the kinds of conversations you might have just standing in a coffee line at a conference or at the happy hour, right? So networking becomes so much easier after you've given a talk. I'm moving to slide 7. The other thing that we find is that it also helps with hiring. Now, many of you may be working in companies where you are trying to hire, and hiring tech talent these days is pretty difficult. There's not enough supply and too much demand. But when you speak in public about your projects, the work you've done, the processes you have at your company or your group to get things done, people will take notice. And chances are there are going to be a handful of people in the audience who are looking for a job. And they'll approach you afterwards to say, hey, I like the way you approach the problems. I like the work you're doing. Do you have any openings? And this is especially important. I don't know how many people are on the line who are women or other members of underrepresented minorities in tech. But if you are an underrepresented minority, or if you are a woman, and you give talks and there are female candidates in the audience or underrepresented minorities in the audience, if they like the way that you're talking about your work and your projects, chances are they are going to be able to see themselves being successful at your company and again want to reach out to you to find out about job openings. Now, of course, the flip side is also true that if you are looking for a job and you have the opportunity to speak at a meetup or a conference, people will take notice of your talent and you'll be more visible in your job search. So it helps with both of those. I'm going to move on to slide number 8 now. And again, if you have any questions, please enter them into the Ustream chat window. And Jordan, who is helping me out, will be bringing those to my attention. And I'm going to take a quick look there. Looks like Kaki Flynn has said, love speaking with you at Wonder Women in Tech. Hey, nice to see you again. Okay, back to the conference. Sorry, to my slides. So slide number 8 now. Stage fright. So many people that we teach in our workshops say, okay, so I understand there are benefits to speaking in public, to giving talks at my company, but I can't get over the stage fright, the nerves, the performance nerves that I feel before I go on stage. And we get it. We both have had stage fright ourselves in spades. And we also know, we read a lot about this, and we know that this fear of speaking in public is actually more fearful for most people around the world than dying. So this is a big problem, right? But don't worry, we actually have some very actionable, simple steps that you can take to get over stage fright. I'm now going on to slide number 9. The first technique, and we just love this technique, is power posing. Some of you may have heard about power posing before through Amy Cuddy's research, and she gave an amazing TED Talk on power posing, and as well as written a book recently called Presence. And in a nutshell, what power posing is all about is looking at if we step back and look at what athletes do when they are on top of their game, when a professional athlete has just won their race or scored a goal, they tend to put their arms up in a victory sign. And they do this almost without even thinking about it. They're confident, they're powerful, they've just done something really impressive and awesome in their sport, and their arms naturally go up in a victory sign. And the reason I say this is natural is we also see it across ages. We see it with little kids at a neighborhood soccer or football game where they've just scored their little goal and they just, run down the field shouting and happy and put their arms up in this victory sign. So we see it in little kids who have maybe not yet learned about, have role models and so forth who are professional athletes, but we also see it in the professional athletes doing this. We see it across cultures, throughout the Olympics, for example. And we also see it across genders. So there's something about our bodies, our human makeup, that forces us almost to put our hands up in this powerful stance when we've just done something impressive physically. And what Amy Cuddy and her colleagues Andy Yap and Dana Carney have studied is that you can actually fake your body into thinking you are powerful and confident and just scored that goal by striking a power pose for 2 minutes. And a power pose, when you strike it for 2 minutes, 2 things happen. One, your testosterone actually increases. And testosterone, and this is true in both men and women, we have testosterone, and when we strike this power pose, our testosterone goes up. And testosterone is something that, it's a hormone that makes us feel powerful, confident, on top of our game, right? At the same time as testosterone going up, our cortisol lowers. And cortisol is an anxiety hormone. It makes us feel stressed out, nervous, anxious. Now look what happens. If we strike a power pose just before we go on stage to give a talk, we're going to feel more powerful and confident and less stressed out. It's the winning combination before giving a talk and for addressing stage fright. So we love this. I'm going to go to slide 10. This is a picture we took at the Grace Hopper celebration in October of 2015, just like 9 months ago. And we taught workshops on public speaking, and we had hundreds and hundreds of women doing power posing. It was awesome. And I know I can't see any of you right now, but I want all of you to get out of your chairs if you can, stand up, or even just sit down where you are and strike a power pose. So literally, I want you to do this. I want you to put your hands up in the air like you've just scored a goal or won your race. Or if you don't want to do that, you can also, almost doesn't matter, you can strike a bodybuilding pose, like feel really bold and confident and strong that way. Or strike your favorite superhero pose, like Superman flying through the air, flying over Gotham City. Or Wonder Woman, and you can't really see me here, but I have my hands on my hips, my feet are slightly put apart, and I'm just feeling really spread out and confident, right? Thank you for doing that. You can sit down if you stood up, and you can stop power posing now. But I just wanted you to feel that, and I recommend that you try this out the next time that you have a talk to give, or even if you're anxious about a conversation you might be having or planning to have at work or with a family member or something. Strike a power pose for 2 minutes and get your testosterone up, your cortisol down, and you're going to feel more confident going into that conversation or giving your talk. Now I'm going to go on to slide number 11. This is a picture of me before I gave a TEDx talk, and this is about 2 years ago. And I want to just say one more thing about power posing. I've shared the research about the testosterone and the cortisol levels changing, the research that Amy Cuddy and her team have done, but I just want to share one piece of anecdotal evidence as well. Now, this TEDx talk, as I said, I gave it about 2 years ago, and I was super nervous leading up to the talk. I had not yet gotten over my stage fright at all. I was still on this journey of I have to give a talk every month to build up this part of my, practice, my professional skills. And then I had an opportunity to give a TEDx talk. And this was a big deal, right? It was a big deal because not only did I have an important message that I wanted to share, it was going to be all about that women are missing from the tech industry, how the numbers have changed over the years, and what everyone in the audience could do about it to encourage more people, more young women that they know to try tech on for size. So I had an important message and I wanted to do a good job with my talk. But on top of that, this was going to be recorded and posted on the TED YouTube channel, right? This was going to be a big deal. So I wanted to do a good job and I got so nervous leading up to it. I was nervous when I was just working on my slides and my outline for the talk. I was nervous as I started practicing it out loud. I got super nervous when I practiced in front of a mini audience of some friends to get feedback. And I thought to myself, how the heck am I going to get through this talk? How am I going to do this? I'm going to be a nervous wreck. And then I watched Amy Cuddy's TED Talk about power posing, and I said, okay, I'm going to give that a try. What do I have to lose? So I did my power posing for 2 minutes in my hotel room the morning of my TED Talk. And let me tell you, you feel ridiculous doing this for 2 minutes, but I did it, okay? And then just before I went out on stage to give the talk, I was power posing again backstage. And guess what? When I went out on that stage to give my talk, I felt confident, powerful, and actually I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being on stage for 20 minutes giving my talk. And I think it shows up well on the talk itself. I'm really proud of the work I did with that talk. So there's my anecdotal story. And I have to say, I power pose now before every talk I give. Even though I feel I don't get much stage fright anymore, I still do that power posing. And in fact, I did it before I got on to this live chat today to give this talk. So again, I'm a fan of power posing and want to encourage all of you to do it. Now let's move on to slide 12. We have a few other techniques to get over stage fright in our book, and I'm going to share just one more. And stage fright, power posing I love, but there's also this other technique that I absolutely love as well. And it's simply called meet and greet. Now, so many of us, when we get to a conference or an event where we are giving a talk, we'll get there a little bit early, we'll set up our slides, we'll get organized and feel like, we're prepared, make sure everything is projecting and so forth. And then it's so very tempting, especially if you're an introvert like me, it's so tempting to pull out my phone and then start checking email. And let me tell you, this is bad for 2 reasons. One, the first is you might get an email that's going to totally distract you and throw you off. The email might be from your team saying, oh my gosh, we've just broken that check-in, system's down, we need to do something, and you're going to be kind of freaked out about that. You don't need to go there, right? Not right before you give a talk. The second thing, or another piece of email you might get, is from your child's school saying, hey, there's a problem at school, can you come in tomorrow for an important parent-teacher meeting? Again, you don't need that stress just before you go on stage, so don't be checking your email. And the other thing about checking your email, especially if you're on a device, is you tend to crouch down and hold your phone or your device in your hands, and your shoulders are pulled in. I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but you're pulled in, and basically you are undoing all the power posing that you just did. You want to be expansive instead and stand strong and open. So put the phone away, grab your business cards, and go out instead and meet and greet the other early birds who have arrived at the audience. You can just go up to them and say things like, hey, I'm Karen, I'm presenting today. Where'd you come from? Or, hey, I'm Karen, I'm presenting today on this topic, and what are your questions? What do you hope that I'm going to be talking about? And you stay busy during the time leading up to your talk so you don't get as nervous. You also meet a few friends. You basically are able to look out to the audience once you start talking, and because you've had that little connection with that person ahead of time, they're going to be a little more engaged with you, a little more eye contact as you're talking, and it's going to help you feel more confident as you deliver your message. So again, meet and greet is another great technique for addressing stage fright. I'm now going to go on to slide number 13. And this says, why would anyone care about what I have to say? All right, and so this is yet another thing we hear from our students all the time. It's like, okay, I get the benefits of public speaking. I think I can try those stage fright busters and get over some of my fear, but I'm not an expert in anything. You know, maybe I've only been doing my job for a year, or I'm an intern, or I am not an expert in this tech stack that I'm using. I just use it. I didn't develop it. The list can go on and on of all the reasons we make up of why we don't think people would care about what we have to say. But trust me, they do. I'm going to go to slide 14. People want to hear about your experiences, your perspective on anything. What did perhaps you do with that tech stack? What's the implementation that you were responsible for? Or what kind of process did you put in to address that last issue that was raised in a retro? People want to hear unique experiences. Otherwise, they would just sort of stay home and read a book or look at some blog posts about the topic. No, they've come out to hear you talk about your experiences using that tech stack, your experiences in that role, your experiences with rolling out that new process, whatever it might be. Slide 15 now. And everyone seems to be in such a hurry these days, and people want to fast track their own learning. This is especially true in tech. I mean, we have to acknowledge our tech industry changes so quickly, such rapid pace changes with new technologies, new APIs, new approaches coming out all the time. And so people want to be able to fast track their learning of that new technology, that new API, that new whatever. And they are coming to hear other people's experiences. You know, what did you learn when you were using that new API, when you were rolling it out, when you were integrating it the first time? How did you come up to speed? What websites or resources did you use? Who's the best at answering questions at an online forum? Basically, they want to know what you did to learn that technology, to learn that new area so that they can get to it even faster. Now to slide 16. They also want to learn from the mistakes you've made. And while it can be very difficult to share mistakes that we've made, to share things that we wish we had done differently, this approach often makes for a very effective and memorable talk. People want to hear cautionary tales. This is what I did wrong. This is what I wish I had done differently. This is what I wish I had known before I started out on this project. Those are the kind of stories people love hearing. And again, while it's hard to share them, that makes a great talk. So look for mistakes that you can feel comfortable sharing. I'm going on to slide 17 now. Now, in our book, we have an approach we call the inventory method. And the inventory method is simply a way for you to take stock of the projects over roughly the last 6 to 12 months that you've worked on. List them out and then answer a few key questions about each project, such as what was the problem we were trying to solve with this project? What was my role? What technology did we use? How did I go about learning it? What do I wish I had known before I started this project? If I had to do it all over again, what would I do differently? There's a structured framework in the book to ask these questions and have you answer them. And then basically, once you have some of these answers in place, it's the beginning of a talk that you could give on that project. And we then recommend and step you through how to test the waters and see if that would be of interest to other people and to get their feedback and refine your talk topic from there. So the inventory method is a great way to go about figuring out and answering that question, why would anyone even care about what I'd have to say? Trust us, they do, and you can extract your expertise and figure out a talk to give. I'm now going to slide 18. And this says, who is your ideal audience? Excuse me. When you are creating a talk, it is so hard to think about speaking to a very general, open-ended kind of audience. People mix, with all sorts of different experience levels and backgrounds and so forth. And it's so much easier to think about giving a talk if you can narrow the focus down to something very specific, such as this is for beginners who have perhaps built an iOS app but haven't yet delivered their first Android app. Or this is for people who are highly experienced with using this graphing tool, and I'm going to help them supercharge their charts for next time, right? Being specific about whether they're a beginner or an advanced person. You can also, if it's a career development talk about these are people who are working in the tech industry and only have 2 years of experience or something like that. But treating this exercise here of identifying your ideal audience is pretty much, if you work in tech today, like creating a persona for a project that you're working on. A persona being, here's the ideal person who would use our project, or prototypical person who would use our product. They have this business need, they have this experience level, maybe this is their background in terms of the other, the education they got and the ecosystem of tools that they use. And they maybe work in an agency, or they work in a large company, or they're independent. Being very specific about all of those elements of who the ideal persona is for your software product or your tech product is the same type of thing you want to do when you're going about figuring out who is the ideal person who would be benefiting from my talk. And being really clear about that then allows you to tailor your message to think about delivering only to that one person in the audience, and you can be very targeted and confident that you're going to be able to help them. And of course, if you're then proposing your talk to someone at your company who is organizing an all-hands meeting, or proposing your talk to a conference, you can say very confidently in any kind of proposal you're making that this is the kind of person I want to talk to, this is the kind of person who would benefit from my talk. And it shows that you've given a lot of thought to the content you're going to be delivering and who would benefit. So it helps you come across more confidently in your proposal, in your pitch for a talk. I'm going to move on to slide number 19, which says, "It was a dark and stormy night." We're going to talk about storytelling now. And what I have to admit is that when I learned to give talks many, many years ago, a mentor told me, well, it's a very simple formula, Karen. What you want to do is start with your agenda. In other words, tell them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them, move on to the content of your material, and then wrap up by telling them what you told them. So tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and you tell them what you told them. And I followed that format for many, many, many years. And it's clear, it's kind of concise, it's an obvious kind of approach. But once I started kind of getting hooked on watching TED Talks, I realized that the best TED Talks start with a story. They start with the equivalent of, "It was a dark and stormy night." And when we hear words like "it was a dark and stormy night," or if we literally read those in a book as we're reading a great novel, we're engaged as audience members, right? Or as readers. We're pulled in. We wonder, well, what's going to happen in this dark and stormy night? And if I were in the picture, would I be inside sipping a nice warm beverage next to a fire? Or would I be out in the elements getting wet and cold? And what's going to happen to the protagonist who's about to be introduced, right? We're engaged. We want to know more. We're paying attention. And I firmly believe that you can create the equivalent of "it was a dark and stormy night" for a tech talk. You can start your tech talk not with the agenda, but with a story. And I'm going to give you 2 examples now of what I'm talking about. Here's the first one. Imagine I wanted to give a talk like this. This is sort of the, before the old style of starting with agenda. Here's the agenda. Hi, my name's Karen Catlin, and I'm here today to tell you 3 best practices for handling a distributed denial of service attack, a DDoS. Let's get started. Okay. All right, so there's my agenda. That's a fine way to start a talk, right? It's very clear who I am and what I'm about to tell you. But let's contrast that with starting with a story. Let me show you. 6 months ago, we were under attack. Our website was experiencing a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. And it was our first one ever. And we didn't know what to do. Well, in my talk today, I'm going to share 3 best practices for handling a distributed denial of service attack that we wish we had known that night. Okay, so you see, by starting with a story and then leading into your agenda, you can kind of hook your audience and get them interested and make them wonder, well, oh my gosh, what would I do if I had been in her shoes handling that DDoS? Now that's an example of starting with a real life scenario, a real life story, something that really happened to us. It doesn't have to be real life though. You can have an imaginary story, a hypothetical story that you set up to get context and hook your audience. Here's another example of starting with a story, and it's a hypothetical story. So again, first I'm going to start by kind of showing you the old-fashioned way, the start with the agenda way. Here we go. Hi everyone, I'm Catlin, and in my talk today, I'm going to tell you how to set up your first GitHub account and to populate it in less than 60 minutes. Okay, again, there it is. It's clear. You know my name and what I'm going to cover in the talk. Let's again contrast that with starting with a story. And this is going to be a hypothetical story. So I'm going to start with the word imagine. Imagine that you are applying for your first tech internship, and the application form asks for your GitHub account, but you don't have one. And you are meeting with the recruiter in less than an hour. Well, don't worry. In my talk today, I'm going to tell you all the steps you need to follow to set up that GitHub account, put some code in it, populate it, and be prepared for that interview. No problem. Let's go. Okay? So whether your story is hypothetical and made up to set context, or it's something that you really experienced and went through, use stories to start your talk, to grab your audience's attention, to put them in the context of what you want to be sharing, have them feel like they're walking a mile in your shoes, and then launch into the rest of the talk and the training you want to do, the points you want to share. And ideally, you're going to refer back to that story as you go through your talk and make different points. Storytelling is an awesome way to engage your audience. Okay, I'm going to move on to slide number 20 now, which is handling Q&A. Now, again, as we think about our students that we teach public speaking to, many people initially are like, okay, I see that there are benefits. Okay, I guess I can get over stage fright with those techniques. Okay, I guess I can extract my expertise and figure out a story to tell. All right, I guess I can do all those things. But oh my gosh, I don't want to have to handle the Q&A session. I'm so concerned about getting a question that I am not going to be able to answer. And as soon as that happens, people are going to see me as a fraud, right? They're going to say, you never should have been up there giving that talk in the first place. You can't even answer that question. So once again, in our book, we have a couple of techniques for handling Q&A and preparing for it. I am going to share 2. So the first one I'll share is what we call the mind reader strategy. And the mind reader strategy is something that basically allows you to prep for questions, be prepared for questions, and have you come across as seeming like you're a mind reader, but really you've done your homework. So that homework might be, as you practice a talk in front of colleagues or friends, asking them to write down, what questions do you think I'm going to get? And then reviewing that list of questions and making sure you have some answers in your back pocket that you can just pull out and provide. You can also be a mind reader in terms of asking, during that meet and greet that I mentioned, asking audience members, what are your questions? What do you think you might what do you want to get out of the talk? What questions do you have about this topic? And you then have at least a few minutes before you go on stage to think about some answers to their questions. And in fact, you can even address that kind of awkward time when you say, okay, now I'll take the questions from everybody and no one's asking anything, and that's kind of awkward. You can even fill up that time by saying, now I'm going to take your questions, and I actually have one ready for all of you to ask as the first question. I was talking to the person down here in the audience in the blue shirt, and beforehand they asked me this question. Here it is, and then you basically let the, announce the question that that person asked you privately, and you provide the answer. So you can kind of fill that void of awkwardness before people actually feel confident to go up to the mic or raise their hand and ask you a question. So the mind reader strategy is a great kind of approach to just be prepared and have some answers in your back pocket, but also to be able to address that awkward, void of people actually asking questions at the very beginning of a Q&A. Now, on top of that, chances are that you might get a question that you had not anticipated, you don't know the answer to, you really can't answer it. Well, we've got a technique for that too. It's called the crowdsource strategy. And the crowdsource strategy for question and answer periods is simply this. When you get a question that you don't know, you can say, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to it. Is there anyone out there in the audience who has the answer to this question? Chances are there's going to be someone who's just been at the edge of their seat thinking to themselves, I know, and they want to share their knowledge, their expertise. And so they're going to jump up and raise their hand and say, the answer. And so then it's great. You've engaged yet one more audience member because they've been able to participate in your talk and you've answered the question. And if no one can answer the question, that's okay too, because then you get to respond with, well, that was a really tough question. Look, no one here knows the answer. So tell you what, find me after the talk and we'll brainstorm on some ways to find the answer to your question. See me after the talk and I'm sure we can figure it out. Okay, so just handle it with being professional, with not getting freaked out that you don't know the answer. Just have this approach, this strategy at the ready so that you can apply it and handle the question and just move on confidently. Okay. And with that, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up by, again, thanking IEEE Women in Engineering for hosting this and making sure that we have some time for question and answer now. Again, if you joined a little bit late, I want to say that we are giving away 100 copies of our book, Present, A Techie's Guide to Public Speaking. We are giving away the ebook, and so in the chat there is a link that you can go and download it. It's available to the first 100 people. Okay, so we've got some questions that I am seeing. First one, which is more important when giving a presentation? Is it content or delivery? And while that's a good question, I would say both, but you can have the most awesome content, and if you are uncomfortable, awkward, ineffective at giving the delivery, about focusing on that, then it's not going to be received, right? And likewise, if you have very little to say and you're a really great presenter, that can be a problem too. We recommend, regardless of if you're feeling stronger on your content or your delivery, that everyone practice. Practice, practice, practice. The best presenters, ones if you think about people in industry that you admire, professors you admire, those TED Talks that you might enjoy watching, the best presenters who look like they do it naturally and seamlessly, believe me, they practice. They practice over and over again. They make sure they're comfortable with their material. They get feedback on their content and so forth. So make sure that even if you have the most awesome content, that you are practicing so that when you do deliver your talk, you are doing it in a professional, confident way. That's the whole point, is it's all about confidence and coming across very confidently when you give a presentation. And that confidence comes from practice. Question number two, how can I be better prepared to speak off the cuff? Oh yeah, this is definitely a challenge, and some of that is related to how I was talking about the Q&A, handling Q&A, but of course speaking off the cuff often happens if you are just in a hallway conversation or want to speak at a meeting to answer a question or to chime in on something. I think that's probably what the person was talking about. it's hard to give a very general answer to that, except again to practice. Now, one thing I did probably about 10 years ago is I took an improv class. And it was taught by a theater professor, but taught at my company. And improv is actually all about speaking off the cuff. It is getting comfortable with speaking about any topic that's just sort of thrown at you. And it gets you comfortable at just forming words and phrases and delivering those in a confident way. So if you have the opportunity to take an improv class in your community, for example, I would recommend that. It can be a lot of fun, and I think it can help you get over some of the issues you might have with speaking off the cuff. Number 3, how do I overcome a tendency to say and Great question. And if you've been paying attention to me as I've been giving this webinar, I certainly have a handful of ums and uhs that I tend to weave in there without meaning to. So I apologize for that. It is something that many of us do. One of our approaches, though, to get rid of ums and uhs, and also to address a number of other techniques or skills that you need for public speaking, is to actually record yourself practicing your talk. Record yourself using your webcam on your phone or on your computer. Record yourself giving your talk and then watching it. And I'll tell you, I do this and I actually hate seeing myself on video. I'm getting more and more comfortable with it, but I still do not enjoy seeing myself on video. But when I see myself delivering messages, delivering a talk, I start to notice when I do have those ums and uhs. I start self-correcting the next time I give the talk because I'm kind of hyper aware of when those ums and uhs tend to come into my conversation. So we need to record ourselves, we need to actually watch it, and we need to pay more attention to when we're doing it. The other thing I'll say about ums and uhs is that many of us feel uncomfortable with silence. We feel we need to fill all of the space when we're giving a talk. We need to be speaking constantly to keep the audience's attention. And that actually is not the case. Silence can be your friend. Taking a pause to collect your thought, even if it is sort of, scratching your head to show the audience that I'm thinking about what I want to say next. This is going to be really important. I need to collect my thoughts. You can do that and be silent and not have to fill in with the ums and uhs, which is what we're usually doing when we say ums and uhs. We want to fill in all that space, and we don't have to. So practice with slowing down, being comfortable with silence, and realize that the audience is going to be paying attention to your words, and you don't need to fill in all those blank spaces. Hope that helps. And then number 4, how do I make a webinar or conference call more lively? I would love to hear a little bit more from that person about what kind of is happening for them, but I'll share a few thoughts about what I do to make webinars and conference calls more lively. One is literally I stand up, and I'm standing up now as I'm giving this live chat. I stand up because I have more energy and my diaphragm is actually open so I can project more, and I feel like it's more like I'm talking to people. If I sit down, I'm a little more kind of relaxed and lazy about it, and so I feel like I lack energy, and my audience can definitely pick that up. So I've learned that I need to stand up whenever I'm giving a webinar. The other thing is having someone who can be monitoring the chat window and encouraging questions is a great best practice too. And something that I did not do today, but you certainly could consider doing that for a webinar you're giving, is actually taking a pause and asking questions in the middle of your talk or periodically throughout your talk. One thing I did today was I got all of you to power pose, for example. So I got you to engage, to pay attention. You can do something like that, an activity, or you can ask a question, like show of hands, how many of you have experienced this problem? Write yes or no in the chat window. something like that. But asking questions and making it interactive can help as well. Okay. Question number 5. Are you ever nervous when giving a talk? Yes, I am. I have to admit, ever since I made that pledge to myself to start giving a talk once a month and just building up my sort of experience, and ever since I gave that TEDx talk where I did my power posing beforehand and I was not nervous when I went out onto that very big stage, I must admit my stage fright and nervousness is going lower and lower with every talk. But I still have some fright, and I must admit that, so I power pose. I did say that I power pose before all my talks just as a best practice to make sure I've got that testosterone up and the cortisol going down. But I also have to make sure that I have memorized sort of my first, 20 seconds or so of a talk. I want to memorize it so that when I get out on stage, I know exactly what I want to say and I can just deliver that first sentence or 2 or 3 very powerfully and confidently. Because after all, the first sort of 20, 30 seconds of getting out on stage is when we are the most nervous. And if we can deliver our opening remarks very confidently, that story we want to tell, for example, we can potentially get over the nerves and then go on to deliver the rest of the talk. So my 2 go-to techniques for addressing my nerves, which I do get, and I actually think a little bit of nerves is good because you'll have some energy on stage. You won't be too quiet, too laid back, too lazy kind of a feeling. So I think a little bit of nerves is good, but you can keep them under control by power posing, by doing that meet and greet, and by memorizing the first few lines that you want to say when you step out on stage. Okay. So I am going to close the session now. I think we're at the end of our questions. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I want to thank Joranda, who has been monitoring the chat window. Thanks so much. And I want to thank the IEEE Women in Engineering organization for hosting me today and for all the work that you do, the great work. So thank you, everyone. Download that ebook. Have some fun, and I hope to see all of you on stage sometime soon. All right, take care.